Friday Live. My name is Matthew Dashper-Hughes. I'm a Sandler trainer here in the northwest of England, and today it's I've got to say one that I'm really looking forward to, even more so than I normally do, because this week I'm joined by my very good friend, Mr. Nick Pilgrim. And Nick is not only the boss man and head creative ninja that's behind a marvelous video production agency in the northwest of England called Cinerobota. He is also a musician, a band leader, a great singer and a great musician in his own right with a band called Clockwork, creating some phenomenal music. And we're going to be talking today about what we've both learned from being musicians that is highly applicable to business. And you know, there's a remarkable amount, and this was prompted by a great post that Nick put out a couple of weeks ago. But before we get into that amazing conversation, and I'm really looking forward to it, Nick, welcome to Friday Live. And would you just like to introduce yourself and sort of say what it is you do and how you add value to your clients in sort of 60 seconds or so?
Absolutely. It's really good to be on this thing. So my name's Nick. I run a business called Cinerobota, and what we do is we go out and we help businesses who they're brilliant businesses. They're filled with brilliant people, but they've got some really great ideas and a new product and new services that they're trying to put out there. But sometimes they have problems in that they don't necessarily know how to put that message across as to how the stuff they're doing is going to kind of rock other people's worlds. And sometimes that can result in these new products and services just kind of crumbling and blowing up in flames, and then there's a lot of pain and discomfort and horrible bits about that. So what we do is we create some video content that communicates that message to their potential target audience, and so that allows them to go and kick ass and take names and do all the good stuff that they all dream of doing.
Fantastic. Kicking ass and taking names. I love it. Absolutely fantastic. So let's get straight into this then. I mean, we're both musicians. You're far more accomplished at running bands and things than me, because you sort of do a very holistic approach to this. And, you know, frankly, I'm lazy. I just pick up my guitar and play. But talk me through this. Talk me through where the original post that you did a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn came from, because it really resonated with me.
Okay, so I was having a conversation with a guitarist in my band, Adam, a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about how I've been playing in bands a long time. I've been playing bands for nearly 2 decades, which is a terrifying number, but there you are. And we're talking about sort of how we developed as musicians in terms of not just as musicians, but in terms of as band people and as organizers and as managers and as people that kind of make stuff happen. And the idea that kind of floated around was, well, actually, when I started my business, I was weirdly well equipped to do a lot of the stuff that a lot of people freak out about when they start a business. Things like, how am I going to get a logo made, or where am I going to find this from? How are we going to put stuff out on social media? How are we going to get people interested in this? How are we going to approach people? Oh God, there's this like intrinsic terror in the back of your head biting away at going, they're going to laugh at you, they're going to hate you, but, and all of that stuff about communicating with people and getting something moving. And by being in bands for many years, what I'd realized was that I've already done all of that, and we've already kind of had this kind of soft launch with all of these things. And one of the things that a lot of people really struggle with when they're starting a business is that you have to be very multi-skilled. You have to be able to do loads of different things, hundreds of different things. And playing in bands and managing bands, you have to do exactly the same thing. You have to be, if you're a musician, you can't just play music. You have to be a songwriter. You have to be a social media expert. You have to be a professional driver. You have to be able to load things in. You have to be an artist. You have to be a mix engineer. You have to be a video producer, video creator, a presenter. You have to be a salesperson. You have to be a marketeer. You have to be an actual manager, and project lead and project developer. You have to be a website developer. You have to be all of these things that you dipped your toes in with over the years as a band, and then kind of realized, okay, I can do a little bit of this. And sometimes where you dip your toe and you go, okay, I'm not very good at this, I'm going to pay someone else to go and do this. All of those lessons, a lot of those hard lessons have already been learned in a much more sort of easy and well, not easy, this wasn't easy at all, but in a previous setting, but without you kind of that idea of you being terrified of the business that you're starting and throwing everything into just kind of crumbling around you. So you've tried to do all those things, you've learned to do all those gazillion jobs that you have to do as a business owner.
So putting it in slightly different terms, listening to what you're saying there, I mean, it's almost like learning how to be a Swiss Army knife rather than a basic pen knife, but doing so in an arena where you haven't got necessarily the expectation of performance or potentially the high level of implication of what happens if you fail really badly and fall on your face. Because we all know that at certain things at certain times, we're going to fail at certain things because failure is an inevitable part of life, right? But, you know, getting there and being able to, okay, not being a jack of all trades and master of none, but certainly being able to broaden your skill set is fundamentally important. I mean, interesting this. I mean, I really love this idea. I think there's a rich seam of conversation here, and no way we're going to get through it all in half an hour, that's for sure. But drilling into it there, I mean, you mentioned a bunch of stuff there. Let's talk first about the marketing and development of a brand, because that sort of seems like a really sensible place to start. You talked about developing logos and all that kind of stuff. What would you say has been the read across from your experience with developing a band or bands, because you've done several, and a business, and how those two things parallel?
You learn very quickly about the damage that a bad brand can do. And if you do or say something or put something out there that will just fall flat on its face because it just doesn't match the brand identity that you developed. When you're playing in a band, you're very fortunate in some ways in that you already started to develop that brand. So if you're a glam rock band, your brand is very, 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 very different than if you're freestyle jazz. You know, if you would think so, although I think there's actually a market there for that idea. As like, you know, the Italian winners, imagine if they were playing freestyle jazz, the Italian Eurovision winners, like jazz band dressed like that. That'd be amazing. I love it. But you very quickly understand what your brand is and what your audience are after. And that's a really powerful thing when you're going into business, because then you're already starting to think, okay, well, what kind of brand do I have? Is it a serious brand? Is it a more light-hearted brand? Is it a brand that sort of wants to challenge people? Is it a brand that wants to engage with people? Is it a brand that wants to share the ride with people? You know, and you very quickly kind of realize what that's going to be. So some bands, they go out there and they might put out, take a look at their social media posts. They put out their stuff that is there's a band called Filter, hilarious. The guy who runs Filter, the singer, is terrible at social media, but he has this very serious sort of outlook, and he challenges lots of things that goes on in the news. Whereas you would get, say, someone like Motley Crue. I mean, I've not looked at Motley Crue's socials in a while, but they might, if they were doing what they were doing today now, then they would approach it in a very sort of different way. So you start to understand how that message affects how people view you, and how that is a brand.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a ton of sense. And also there's the cultural mores of the time as well. And to the point you just made there, I mean, not that there was particularly social media when Motley Crue were really still a thing, you know, back before Vince Neil's voice was completely screwed. But sorry, Vince, I do apologize, mate, if you're watching, and I know you're a big fan of the show. But yeah, basically, you know, back in the day, back in the mid 80s, there's certain things that they were doing which probably these days would get them cancelled, I think, you know, to use the current parlance. But yeah, so you've got to make sure that your brand not only represents you and your cultures and your value, but also, you know, fits into the wider sort of social culture as well. So it's a bit of that going on, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things as well, kind of how you fit in with that social culture as well, is that what you and you probably have some opinions on this as well, is that when you're going and talking to people and playing shows, and when you're going and presenting this project that you're pouring your you know, heart and soul and lifeblood into, what you're doing is you're actually selling. But you're not selling in a way where you even realize you're selling. You sell in a way that you're trying to get people on board with an idea, or find out if they would be interested in getting on board with an idea. So it's that there's a number of Sandlerisms that I'll let you repeat rather than myself, given, you know. But you're not going out there to just try and sell. You're not, you know, if you go out there as a musician trying to be a salesman, then it's going to come across a little bit weird. Whereas if you go out there and try and speak to people and try, you know, help them sort of, you know, discover new music, and it's a very different sort of approach, I think.
Yeah, and I think, you know, what you're talking about there, it really does kind of resonate, no pun intended, given that we're talking about music. But, you know, we are talking about, you know, things that I suppose anybody who wants to get people to buy into something fundamentally is doing some sort of sales job. And we're all in sales in that sense. You know, if you want to grow anything, well, you know, growth is a euphemism for sales. You can't grow without selling something, or at least getting more people on board, right? So there's got to be some of that somewhere, which means that when you are truly passionate about something and you're emotionally engaged with it, selling in that world looks like getting other people to be similarly emotionally engaged. And, you know, some of the best marketing strategists that I know, they don't talk about winning customers, they talk about winning fans. And you think, well, that's an interesting parallel right there, isn't it? But, you know, we talk about winning hearts and minds, and it's hearts first, minds second, right? So it's about people engaging emotionally, and then maybe sort of their intellectual aspect of things catching up afterwards. So there's a huge aspect to speaking to the right part of our prospect or prospective fan or prospective customer's brain, and there's and engaging with them in that way. And emotions and creativity, they're hugely tied up together. And a lot of our decision making is emotional in its nature. So, you know, the best brands are those that people feel an emotional connection to. So I think there's loads of read across there. You're absolutely right. I mean, bouncing things back to you, one of the things that strikes me from my world as a musician is that actually the amount that I've learned, not with my salesperson's hat on, but my sales trainer's hat on, that actually speaks to the way in which people learn. And, you know, I with my band, what I always say is like, I practice in the week in order to get to rehearsal, and then I rehearse in order to get to a gig. Goodness me, wouldn't it be nice to go and do a gig again, right? But, you know, it's about sort of building up your learning, disciplined, regular reinforcement training, constantly doing these things, building new neural pathways. I mean, is that something that you found as well when it comes to education and personal development?
Absolutely. It's the idea of, okay, I said I was going to leave you with Sandlerism, so I'm going to throw in there as well, as professionals practice in private and then perform in public. You've never seen a band, you hope you've never seen a band, go on stage and be sitting there and going, hang on, stop, 2 seconds, is this a C or is this a D? We're going C. When you say a C, do you see it means C minor or C ninth? How's a C ninth chord? Oh God, hang on, what's the ninth of a C? Right, okay, hang on. You don't see people talking about this stuff. They've gone away and they've had these discussions and arguments in private, and then when they go onto a stage, that they're performing and they're putting the best foot forward, and they're playing to an audience. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that when it comes to kind of working in business. It definitely fits in the sales side of things as well, but I think in a lot of things that we do in business, if you can rehearse that and you can figure out what your talk track is and what your messages are, even come down to whether when you actually start a meeting, you start a sales meeting with a prospective client, should you maybe have prepared for that before you go into that thing, or were you just going on stage and winging it and wondering how you make a C9 chord?
Absolutely. Do you know, that's a fantastic analogy. I love that, because I actually think that a sales team that doesn't rehearse before they go into something, to at the very minimum, ticket to the game, they need to do like a pre-call plan. You know, get ready for what it is you're going to be talking about. I mean, Christ, if you're going to go and see somebody, you know, time's your one non-renewable resource, and you owe it to them. And you owe it to yourself to at least do some basic preparation. But if you're going in as a team to actually sell as a team, to present as a team, you've got to war game this stuff. You've got to rehearse. You've got to practice. And if you don't, frankly, that should be a sackable offence. You know, like you say, it's like getting up on stage and going, this is our first rehearsal. Happy days, audience. Are you going to enjoy this? Oh, you crap. You know, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, a really, really good point. So along with the rehearsal and the practice, of course, there's also that element of having to get the right people in the band.
Yes, and this is something that the more I think about it, the more it really resonating with myself. That's a self-congratulatory thing to say, but there you go. Is that in business, as you well know, I'm a great lover and believer in particularly disc profiling, but generally psychometric profiling is really, really good in general. Now, you can't live your life by this. There's that scene of from Donnie Darko comes to mind with the line between love and hate. No, love and fear. That was it. Yeah. And then Donnie Darko just flips out and says, "You can't do this. You can't." I can't remember exactly what he said. The line is correct. Watch this. But whilst you can't live your entire life based around this kind of quadrant of disc, it does really, when you learn about that, it does really kind of allow you to start to think back on previous relationships with and friendships and business partnerships that you've had with people, and go, okay, what's gone right and what's gone wrong based off of this? What different personality types have we had successful interactions with, and have we not had successful interactions with? And when you get people to play in a musical project with you, it's really important to be obviously pushing forward in the right direction, but in some ways to have that level of sort of variety in personality types to a certain extent, which can be frustrating sometimes. But if you have lots of people who are incredibly proactive and incredibly task driven, then they're often going to not sort of take a breather and go, hang on, what do we need to do to think about this stuff before we can go ahead for it? So perfect example of this, I mentioned in Clockwork, we have decided to change our timeline a little bit. We decided to change this last night, in fact. And I was having a chat with our guitarist, Adam, who is a C, and I am a DI, as you know. And typically with this stuff, had my D hat on very much. And we talk about changing the timeline to this. And I'm going, no, we cannot delay. It must be done now. Must be enshrined in stone. But in actual fact, the guy was right, because we need to have more things lined up before we can launch. So it's good to have that variety to someone else to be able to sit there and go, hang on, let's just think about this thing right.
Can I just interject very slightly there, just for the benefit of the audience, for anybody who's not familiar with disc profiling? This is a high-level kind of psychometric, which really talks about people's preferred communication styles, behavioral styles, and decision-making styles. And it splits people into, broadly speaking, a blend of how task-orientated versus people-orientated they are, and how active they are versus how reserved they are. So basically, active, forward-moving, people tend to be either very people orientated, in which case they tend to be influencers, or task orientated, in which case they tend to be dominant personalities. So they tend to be brief, be bright, be gone. Let's get on with it. Let's JFDI, just effing do it, which is kind of where Nick's profile lives, and it's also where my profile lives. I'm an ID, he's a DI, so we kind of both got that kind of fast talking, let's get things done kind of approach, which is why we need the dynamic tension of people who've got the more reserved approach. They maybe look before they leap occasionally. And we occasionally need those guys in our lives and girls in our lives to say to us, guys, just check out, there's some unintended consequences here. You're about to make a massive cock up. So it's really important, like Nick says, to have that dynamic tension of a really good mix of people, providing that it's all constructive challenge and that there's an environment of safety where you can have those constructive challenges without it becoming unproductive and dysfunctional. Sorry to cut across, Nick, but I thought it was worth kind of just summarizing that briefly there. Sorry, you were saying.
Very well summarized, actually. And the thing is with that is that when you're creating a band with a group of individuals, you want to have, sure, you absolutely want to be proactive. You absolutely want to have people who are driven and go-getters and self-starters, because then you're going to be pushing in the right direction. But you also need to make sure you've got that kind of balance in that. And I think when you're looking at developing a team and building a team of people in business, then you need to do the same thing. You can't just have an entire business filled with people who are those proactive, go-getters, task-oriented individuals, because sure, stuff will get done, but you're going to ruffle a lot of feathers on the way. Likewise, you can't have an entire organization filled with sort of more reactive, people-oriented people, because you're just going to have an entire business filled with wet flannels. So you have to kind of find the balance between them, and to make sure that all fits in very well. And someone who is reactive and people orientated is incredibly important to the kind of cohesion within a group of people, to make sure that everything's running smoothly, because otherwise tensions will eventually run high, and then that's when problems can come in.
And I think that's true. I mean, I'm going to say a word in defense of the steady relators here, because they're not all wet flannels. They just.
I know, but 20 of them together definitely would be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, no, I would agree. The collective noun for 20 steady relators probably is a wet flannel. I don't know, but it's, ultimately, if you've got a few of these people, then they make sure that we stay structured. We don't break things, basically, because us idiots that leap in without looking before we leap, occasionally will break stuff, right? That's why we need these people to keep us honest, and they need us to move them forward. So it's a nice tension. We like that. It's good. So looking at that, I mean, it also speaks to the element of, I suppose, the silo thing as well, where the worst band I ever was in, and this is probably going back about 30 odd years ago. So it was when I was probably still relatively young, certainly before the hair went grey, that's for sure. We're talking about, you know, that thing where you've got the ego driven guitar player. Funny that, right? Yanks everything up so that the only thing you can hear is the guitar. Not even the drum kit could be heard over him. You know, have you ever had a situation where you've got employees who maybe work like that, where they're the only thing that matters?
Yes, absolutely. And I think Joshua Lyons, who's just commented on the comment thread there, has just said it perfectly. He says a wet flannel is pretty helpful when you got a hot head.
Oh, thank you, Josh. Appreciate that. Good job.
He's just, should we just pub? Should we go pub? He's just summarized it for us now.
Yeah, absolutely. Mic drop. There you go. Josh, you can have the beer. You're on. Good. But yeah, go on. So I mean, looking at the sort of the shall we say the grandstanding ego, what does that do to a band, and what does it do to a business?
If you build either around that ego, it can very easily just turn into it can all just be built just around that singular person. So if that singular person is either not available or not, whether that's available physically or kind of mentally, then things just stop and break down. There's a reason why a band is called a band rather than, you know, one guitarist and three schmucks who follow them around. You have to all be pulling in the right direction and be working together for this thing. And one of the things that very much is interesting about playing in a band is that you're trying to get people, when you get someone to buy into your band, when you try and get someone to join your band, you are trying to get them, and this is a lot tougher than can be hiring for someone in business. You are trying to get them for free to give up huge swaths of their time, often spend significantly more time with you as a group of guys or girls than they would with their significant other, driving around the country to go and do something that they're not going to get any money for. In fact, they're going to spend money on it. It's a very expensive business being a successful band. You know, it takes a lot. If you're lucky enough to start making money from this, then you're very much in the minority. And you're trying to get them to buy into this idea, literally buy into it and actually put money into it, their time, their effort, their love, their attention. Blood, sweat, and tears is not a hyperbolic statement. It's a very true statement. And you're trying to get them to do that for free, and you're trying to inspire them and get them to buy into this idea, into this concept. Now, imagine if, as business people, we could do that, and then add to the fact that we can then pay them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, how interesting is that? So that's a real alignment of your own personal, you know, these are the things that I want to achieve in my life. I want to have that creative self-expression. I believe in this group of people. I believe that the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts, because when you've got the 4 or 5 of us together, we create something that's greater than any one of us could create on our own. That's a feeling of true fulfillment. In fact, I'd say it's pretty much at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of self-actualization. So it has its own intrinsic motivation. This speaks to the fact that people cannot be motivated by somebody else. They have to tap into the intrinsic motivation that they have. And, you know, as business leaders, being able to tap into that is absolutely critical. So this all starts, of course, from hiring. You've got to hire the right talent, because has it ever happened to you where you've hired somebody either in business or in a band where they're absolutely insanely talented, they're so good at what they do, and yet unfortunately culturally, attitudinally, they're just not a good fit, and it destroys everything?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of that comes down to very much working out what they want from this stuff. I've known some musicians out there, actually a bunch of musicians who have been so ludicrously talented, far more talented than I am, who have not done a huge amount in the projects that they've been in. I think a lot of that comes down to what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, I'm a great believer in the idea of if you feed the soul, then the mind and the body will kind of take care of itself over time. And if you find the right people who have that same hunger for that, for feeding for their soul, that's a very high level thing there, but I think you get what I'm talking about. Then that just, everything else will eventually fall into place. Same way, also, to be fair, that even when you're hiring somebody, if you find someone with the right attitude, even if they're not necessarily the best player, they have the right attitude, they will be.
Yeah. You know what? Absolutely right. I remember one of my early bands, and this again dates me quite much. But remember the mid '90s when there was that big proliferation of Irish bars. You know, every bar along the whole street had to be an Irish bar for some reason. So basically, I put together a band quite cynically, playing nothing but Irish folk music. Our fiddle player wasn't the best fiddle player, but he was the best guy. He was just an awesome fella. And, you know, he'd play for 3 hours straight and wouldn't care, always had a grin on his face. Just keep feeding him Guinness. He's happy, you know. But if you think about it, we're talking about here about discretionary effort, aren't we? We're talking about the absolute holy grail of employing people, you know, great effort from people because they genuinely care about what it is they're doing. I mean, you couldn't ask more as an employer for that. And yet we expect it of our bandmates all the time, and expect it of ourselves all the time. Isn't that a great thing to aspire to in business?
Yet what is it that we hire on? Do we hire on attitude? Do most people hire on attitude? Or do they look across the CV and go, well, they've got the right skills, that's very good. They've got a little bit of experience, or that's great. But are they actually asking the right questions to be figuring out whether or not somebody actually, they have the right attitude, they are the right fit culturally? Because if they have the right attitude and they're the right fit culturally, everything else will take care of itself. Because they don't have the right skills, well, they're going to learn those skills. They don't have the right habits to be able to develop those skills. Well, if they have the right attitudes, then they're going to be able to build the right habits into their lives to be able to build those skills. Everything just kind of works out for that. And it's just very much the same as if you're, you know, hiring someone to play in a band. If they sit there and they go, I love music, I want to do music for my life, this is everything that I want. The chances are that if they're not already a really good musician, they're going to be very, very soon. And it's just a case of getting them to play something. That being said, if someone just genuinely can't sing, they probably can't sing. Time, they ain't going to learn to stay in time. But having said that, if whether or not you want to kind of get them to work on the double kick work, but they can stay in time, that's okay. That's fine. Stuff.
I get it. Listen, I mean, you know, you look around some fairly successful people over the years, and actually, you'd argue that some of them probably couldn't either sing or play the drums or whatever. But you know, let's not dwell on that. I think the key point here is that, you know, attitude is like your culture, but in microcosm. So if you hire bad attitude, you're destined to have a bad culture. It's kind of how it works, right? You know, when you've got multiple attitudes together, that's what we call a culture. So yeah, totally get that. And you know, it's weird because very often in both bands and in fairness in business, you see people who are hiring based on skills, experience, and past results. But all those things are in the past. They're in the rear view mirror. You know, just because somebody happened to luck into some good results, or, you know, maybe has got some good experience on paper, doesn't make them a good person. You know, and very often you hire on skills and experience and results, and then you fire them because of crappy attitude or poor habits or poor cognitive ability, you know, because a lot of them are functionally illiterate, that none of them read or basically help to develop themselves. And, you know, failure to develop yourself, frankly, also should be a sacking offense in my personal view. But there you go. I would say that I'm a trainer and coach, right? So, you know, what I'm going to do, to be fair, never trust a trainer or coach who isn't himself or herself trained or coached. You know, I do actually walk the talk on this. So yeah, all good stuff. Listen, I can't believe this. Well, actually, I can, because we've got loads more we could talk about. But it's actually coming round to the end of this half hour together already.
Oh, it is.
I know, nuts, right? Nick, I've really loved this. If we choose to do this again, would you come back on and have another chat with me? Because I think this has been really valuable.
Absolutely. I'm sure we could just basically continue where we left off and just talk again for a half hour. And we'd
you know what, we probably could. And I think, you know, depending on the level of response we get here from people, and there's loads in the chat I can see, we might well end up doing that at some stage. But Nick, just before we wrap up, it would be remiss of me not to ask, how can people get in touch with you? How can people contact you?
Well, first of all, drop me a connect request on LinkedIn. I release videos every single Thursday where I put out these things called Thursday Video Thoughts, where we talk about this sort of stuff and how kind of business can be bettered through video and how you can get better at creating videos. And in terms of business sense, check out Cinerobota. That's business. But in terms of music, I'm currently in a band called Clockwork. We're launching launching the band in the next month or two. So check us out search for us on Facebook. We're also on Instagram as well. And just connect one way or another. Failing that, just drop me a message on LinkedIn, and I'll send you some links. And you can check out what we're getting up to in the future.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much again for this. So that is it for another Friday Live, a whistle-stop half hour that's gone by like lightning. My name's Matthew Dashper-Hughes, and I'm a Sandler trainer here with Sandler Training by Roy Johnson and Matthew Dashper-Hughes here in the northwest of England and Staffordshire. And if you want to reach out and contact me, I'm always delighted to have a chat. mdh@sandler.com will reach me, as will 07715269724. And of course, you can always contact me on LinkedIn. Guess what? There's not too many Dashper-Hughes on LinkedIn. In fact, there's not too many Dashper-Hughes in the world. Basically, just me and my wife. So there you go. That is it for another Friday Live. Join us again next week when we'll be having yet more interesting conversations. And we'll see you all in 7 days. Whatever you're doing over the weekend, have fun and do it safely. Thanks a lot. Very good.